What would you do if you saw a ghost that no one else could see? Would you run away, or would you stay and try to understand it? I often asked myself this question, but I never thought I would face the answer in my own life. My name is Mary. I was 24 years old when this story began. I lived in London, and I worked in a small law office. The work was not always exciting, but it paid for my little flat and food. I liked reading books in the evenings, and I dreamed of one day having my own family. Before I continue to my journey to Hollowbrook Manor, I want to ask you to subscribe, share, and leave a comment. It will help me to tell more stories like this one for you. Now let's continue. One cold November morning, my boss, Mr. Harris, called me into his office. He was a thin man with gray hair and sharp eyes. "Mary," he said, "I need you to travel to the coast. An old woman, Mrs. Whitmore, has died. She lived in Hollowbrook Manor. I was her lawyer. We must look at her papers. You will go to her funeral, and then you will go through her house. Bring back anything important." I was surprised. I had never done such work before. "Alone?" I asked. "Yes," Mr. Harris said. "I am too busy here. You are young and strong. You will manage." I did not feel strong, but I did not want to refuse him. So I agreed. The next morning I packed my small bag and took a train from King's Cross Station. The weather was gray and damp. Thick fog covered the streets of London. I sat by the window of the train, and soon the city disappeared. The train moved faster and faster through the dark countryside. At a small station in the north, I changed to another train. This one was old and slow. A big man with a red face sat down across from me. He looked at the brown envelope in my lap. On it was written, "Mrs. Alice Whitmore, Hollowbrook Manor." The man raised his eyebrows. "You go to that place?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I am from a law office. I must attend the funeral." The man leaned back. "Then you will be the only one there," he said. His voice was low. I tried to smile. "Why do you say that?" I asked. "Because no one in our village will go near Hollowbrook," he replied. "It is not safe. Remember my words." His eyes were dark, and he said no more. I felt a shiver and turned to look out of the window. By evening, I reached the little town near the sea. It was called Dryford. The wind was cold, and the air smelled of salt. The big man from the train introduced himself as Mr. Carter. He gave me his card. "If you need help, come to me," he said. Then he left me at the inn called the Swan. I ate supper, went to my small room, and fell asleep quickly. That night I dreamed of waves crashing on rocks and a woman calling out for someone. The next morning the sun was bright, though the air was still sharp. I dressed in my black suit for the funeral. Mr. Carter was waiting for me downstairs. Together we walked through the square. People stopped talking as we passed. They looked at us but did not smile. I felt like a stranger in a strange land. The church was old and stood beside a graveyard. Inside it was dark and very cold. There were only 3 of us there: Mr. Carter, the priest, and me. Poor Mrs. Whitmore, I thought. No friends, no family. The service was short. I bowed my head in respect. Then, as I lifted my eyes, I froze. At the back of the church, a woman was standing. She was dressed in black clothes that looked very old. A wide black bonnet covered her head, but I saw her face. It was white and thin, like a sick person. Her eyes were dark, and her mouth was tight, as if she carried deep pain. I stared, but no one else seemed to see her. When we left the church, I looked back. She was gone. "Mr. Carter," I whispered. "Who was that woman in black?" He stopped walking and looked at me with surprise. "What woman?" he asked. "There, at the back of the church. She looked very ill." His face became pale. "I saw no woman," he said. His voice shook a little. I wanted to ask again, but he hurried me out into the graveyard. We walked in silence, but my mind was loud with questions. Later that day, I went with a driver and pony across the causeway to Hollowbrook Manor. The path was called Old Tides Crossing. The driver told me we had only 2 hours before the sea came in and covered the road. Then the house would be an island cut off from the land. I held the key to the house in my pocket. My hand shook when I touched it. At last we reached the manor. It was a tall gray house, standing alone on a rise of land. Behind it stretched wide marshes, flat and empty. In front of it was the estuary, shining under the weak sun. The house looked beautiful but lonely. It had many windows, but all of them were dark. The driver turned his pony and left quickly. I was alone. I stood for a moment with the key in my hand. The silence was heavy. A seabird flew by, crying out. Then the sound faded. I unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway. The air inside was cold and damp. Old pictures hung on the walls. Dust lay thick on the furniture. It felt like no one had lived here for a very long time. I went from room to room. Each one was dark, with heavy curtains and heavy chairs. In the kitchen I saw an old kettle. In the study I found piles of papers. This was my task, to sort through them, but I felt no desire to begin. Instead, I pulled back a curtain and looked out of the window. From there I could see the marshes, the estuary, and the little graveyard behind the house. The sun was setting. The water turned red with the light. And then I saw her. The woman in black. She stood beside a gravestone, very still. Her face was pale as snow, and her eyes were fixed on me. I could not move. I could not breathe. Her eyes were full of hate, sharp and cold. I felt frozen, as if her gaze held me there. Then she stepped behind the stone and was gone. My legs shook. My heart raced. I wanted to leave the house, to run back across the causeway, but the tide was already rising. The tide had cut me off. The road was gone under the sea. I could not leave Hollowbrook Manor. I was trapped inside the lonely house. The windows were dark. The air was heavy and cold. I told myself to be calm. I was here only to look at papers. Nothing more. But the memory of the woman in black stayed with me. Her pale face, her dark eyes, the hate in them. I could not forget it. I lit a small lamp in the hallway. Its yellow glow gave little light. Shadows filled the corners of the room. I went to the study, sat at the big desk, and began to look at the piles of papers. Most were old letters, bills, and notes. They were not important. Still, I sorted them slowly. I wanted to keep busy. I wanted to push away my fear. but the silence was too strong. The house did not feel empty. It felt alive, as if it watched me. I stood up and listened. Nothing. Then I heard it. A faint sound. A low creak from above my head. My heart beat fast. I looked at the ceiling. The sound came again, slow, heavy, like a chair moving back and forth. A rocking chair. I froze. The house was empty, yet someone was rocking above me. I wanted to leave the room, but I forced myself to stay. "It is the wind," I whispered. "Only the wind." I sat back at the desk, though my hands shook. I tried to read another letter, but the words blurred. I could not focus. Then, just as suddenly, the sound stopped. The silence returned, deeper than before. I felt relief, but also fear. The silence seemed to wait for me. At last I could not bear it. I left the study and walked back to the hallway. My footsteps echoed on the floor. I climbed the stairs slowly, holding the lamp. Each step felt heavy. The upper hall was colder than below. Dust lay thick on the carpet. Doors lined the passage. All were closed. At the far end, one door was locked. I tried it, but it would not open. I turned away quickly, afraid to stay near it. That night I lay in a small bedroom. The bed was old, but I was too tired to care. I put the lamp on the table beside me. The wind rose outside. It whistled across the marsh. The house creaked with every gust. I pulled the blanket tight around me. At last my eyes closed. I woke in the night to another sound. This time it was not the wind. It was sharper, closer. Knock. 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 My eyes opened wide. The sound came from the passage. I sat up, holding my breath. Knock. 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 Slow knocks, again and again. I wanted to call out, but my voice would not come. I was frozen in fear. The knocking stopped. Silence. I sat still, waiting, but nothing came. After a long time, I fell into a troubled sleep. In the morning, weak sunlight touched the windows. The causeway was dry again. I packed my bag and locked the house behind me. The air outside was sharp and clear. A seabird cried overhead. The sound felt almost kind after the silence of the house. I walked quickly across the causeway to the village. I did not look back at the manor. I was afraid of what I might see. At the inn, the Swan, I ate breakfast. The innkeeper, a round man with sad eyes, asked how my work was going. I wanted to tell him about the sounds, the woman, the locked door, but when I looked at his face, I stopped. He did not want to hear. He already knew something. "The house is very lonely," I said instead. He nodded slowly. "Yes, very lonely." After breakfast, I walked through the square. People watched me as I passed. Some turned away. Others stared, but no one smiled. I began to feel heavy in my heart. Why did they look at me this way? At last I saw Mr. Carter near the church. I went to him. "Mr. Carter," I said. I saw her again. The woman in black. She stood by the graves behind the manor. His face grew pale. He gripped his hat tightly. "Do not speak of her," he said in a low voice. "You must leave that place." "But I must finish my work," I answered. "I must go back." His eyes filled with fear. "Then take care," he whispered, "and pray you do not see her again." But I did see her again. That afternoon, I went back to Hollow Brook with the driver. The tide was low. The road was clear. The driver left me at the house and turned away quickly. I was alone again. Inside, I opened the study desk and began to work. The house was cold, but I was calmer now. I told myself I was foolish to be afraid. Papers could not harm me. Shadows could not harm me. Hours passed. The light outside began to fade. I put more coal on the fire and lit 2 lamps. Then I heard another sound. A soft cry, far away, yet clear. A child's cry. It came from the marsh. I stood at the window. The mist was moving in from the sea. It spread across the ground like a white sheet. The cry came again, thin and sharp. A cry of fear. My hands shook. I pressed my face to the glass. The marsh was empty. No child was there. Still, the cry echoed in my ears. I pulled the curtains closed. Later that evening, I returned to the upper passage. I felt drawn to the locked door. I pressed my ear against it. For a long moment, I heard nothing. Then came a sound. Slow. Hollow. Bump. 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 My blood ran cold. The sound of wood striking the floor. A rocking chair. I stepped back quickly, my lamp shaking in my hand. I wanted to run, but my feet would not move. The sound went on, steady and calm, rocking back and forth. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer. When I opened them, the sound had stopped. The passage was silent again. I hurried back downstairs. I lit every lamp I could find. I wanted the light. I wanted to chase away the shadows. I sat by the fire, but I could not rest. The woman's face filled my mind. The child's cry echoed in my ears. The locked door waited above me, holding its secret. When I returned to the inn the next morning, I found Mr. Carter waiting for me. His face was serious. "You heard her," he said softly. I stared at him. "Her? Who is she?" He sighed. "Long ago there was a governess. Her name was Eleanor. She had a baby boy, but the family did not let her keep him. The boy died in the marsh when a cart sank in the mud. Eleanor never forgave anyone. They say her ghost still walks near Hollow Brook, and when she is seen, a child dies soon after." His words chilled me. I wanted to deny them, but I could not. I had seen her, twice. What did that mean? That night I lay awake in my bed at the inn. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet. I thought of Eleanor, the governess who lost her child. I thought of her pale face and her dark eyes. I thought of the cry on the marsh, the cry that would never end. And I knew that I would have to go back to Hollow Brook Manor. I had to know the truth. I had to face her again. I returned to Hollow Brook Manor the next morning. The sky was gray and the air was sharp. A thin mist already lay on the marsh. I carried food, a lamp, and matches. I told myself that this time I would be brave. I would finish the work. I would face whatever waited for me. Inside the house, the air was damp. The silence pressed on me like a weight. I lit 2 lamps and carried them from room to room. I opened desks and cupboards. They were full of old papers, some yellow with age. Most were useless, but I worked carefully. I wanted to keep my mind busy. If I stopped, I would think of her. The woman in black. Eleanor. By afternoon, the mist had thickened outside. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back. The causeway was already hidden under water. I could not leave even if I wanted to. I was trapped again. I tried to calm myself. The innkeeper had given me a blanket and food. I could sleep here for 1 night. But I knew that she was near. I felt it in the heavy silence. That evening I climbed the stairs with my lamp. My eyes were fixed on the locked door at the end of the passage. I felt pulled toward it. My heart beat fast. I held the key in my hand. The driver had given it to me that morning. "You may need this," he had said. I had not asked why. Now I understood. It was the key to the locked room. My hand shook as I pushed it into the lock. For a moment I could not turn it. At last I forced it round. The lock clicked. The door opened slowly with a long creak. Cold air rushed out. I raised my lamp and stepped inside. It was a child's room. A small bed stood in the corner. A wooden rocking chair faced the fireplace. Toys lay neatly on the shelves. Soldiers, books, and a small boat. Clothes were folded in the cupboard. Everything looked ready for a boy who had left only yesterday. But the dust told the truth. No one had lived here for many years. I stepped closer. The chair began to move. Slowly, back and forth. Creak. Creak. My lamp shook. I wanted to run, but I forced myself to stand still. The chair rocked on though no one sat in it. I whispered, "Eleanor." At once the chair stopped. The silence was heavy. Then a sound broke it. A cry. A child's cry, thin and sharp. It came from outside, across the marsh. The same cry I had heard before. My blood ran cold. I rushed to the window. Mist covered the ground, but I could hear the cry again, more desperate, more lost. I pressed my hand to the glass. The cry echoed through the house. The rocking chair began to move again, faster now. I dropped the lamp. It hit the floor and went out. The room was dark. Only the sound of the chair and the cry filled the air. I fled from the room, pulled the door shut and locked it behind me. My hands shook so much that I dropped the key. I ran down the stairs and into the hall. I lit another lamp with trembling fingers. The house seemed to breathe around me. I wanted only to leave, but the tide held me prisoner. I would have to wait until morning. I sat by the fire with my blanket wrapped around me. My eyes stared into the flames. At last, near dawn, I fell into a restless sleep. When I woke, the fire was out. The tide had gone. The causeway was clear again. I did not wait. I gathered the papers I had taken from the study, locked the door, and hurried across the marsh. My steps were fast. I did not look back. I swore I would never return to Hollowbrook Manor. I stayed at the inn for 2 more days. I sent the papers to Mr. Harris in London. Then I returned home. The city noise felt strange after the silence of the marsh, but I was glad of it. I wanted to forget Hollowbrook. I wanted to forget Eleanor. I told myself I had imagined it all. Yet at night, I woke from dreams of her pale face and the cry of her child. Months passed. Then a year. I married, and soon I had a son. My life felt warm again. My husband was kind. My boy was full of laughter. Sometimes when he smiled at me, I thought of the lost child in the marsh. I prayed that Eleanor's ghost was gone, but in my heart, I was not sure. One Sunday we went to the park in London. The sun was bright. Children played on the green grass. Music played from a band. My husband held our boy's hand. A man was giving rides in a small cart with a pony. My son cried out with joy. He wanted a ride. My husband laughed and lifted him onto the seat. "We will go together," he said. "You wait here, Mary." I smiled and waved as they rode off behind the trees. Then I saw her. She stood by a large tree at the edge of the park. Eleanor, the woman in black. Her face was pale, her eyes dark with hate. She looked straight at me. I could not move. I could not call out. I watched as the cart came back into view. My husband was smiling. My son was laughing. The cart passed near the tree where she stood. The pony gave a wild cry. It reared and turned. The cart struck the tree and overturned. I ran, screaming my son's name. People rushed to help, but it was too late. My little boy lay still on the grass. His face was white. He was gone. My husband was alive, but his body was broken. He never walked again. I held my son in my arms and wept. I looked up. The woman in black was gone. Only the tree stood there in the sun. That was the end of my peace. The ghost of Eleanor had followed me far from Hollowbrook. She had taken what I loved most. I knew then that she would never rest. Her hate was too deep, and I knew that I would never forget her pale face, her dark eyes, and the terrible cry of her child. For the ghost of Hollowbrook Manor had taken my life, though I still lived. My name is Evelyn. I am 62 years old. I live in a small town in the north of England. I live with my husband Peter. We live in a very small house. Life was never easy for us. We worked all our lives, but money was never enough. When I was young, many people told me not to marry Peter. They said he had no money and no future. My parents begged me to think again. My friends told me I was making a mistake. But I loved him. I believed love was enough. I thought we could build a good life together. People said I was wrong, but I still chose Peter. If you want to walk with me through this life, please stay close, subscribe, tell me your country in comments, and share my story. Our wedding was simple. There were no lights, no music, and no gold. There were no gifts, only our hands together. Peter looked at me and said, "I will work every day for you. I will never leave you. We will build a life." Those words gave me hope. But life was harder than our dreams. Peter worked in the fields. He lifted heavy things. He worked long hours in the sun and in the rain. His hands grew rough. His back often hurt. Still, the money was never enough. I also worked. I washed clothes for people. I cleaned houses. Sometimes I cooked for families. We worked together every day, but our house stayed poor. We had 2 children, 1 daughter and 1 son. I loved them more than anything. I wanted to give them a better life. I wanted them to go to school and have dreams. But it was not easy. Every coin we earned went to food and rent. Many days I gave my share of food to the children and told them I was not hungry. But I was hungry. I just wanted them to eat. Our daughter grew into a young woman. She wanted to marry one day. She wanted a family of her own. But no man came to ask for her hand. People whispered behind our backs. They said, "She is from a poor home. No one will marry her." Each time I heard these words, my heart broke. I wanted to protect her, but I could not. I told her, "You are kind and good. Do not listen to them." She smiled at me, but I knew she felt pain. Our son Leo was younger. He watched everything. He saw his father come home with tired feet. He saw me rub my hands after long work. He saw me cry quietly at night when I thought no one was listening. He never spoke much, but he carried my pain in his heart. One evening, I sat in the small room. I looked at the old clothes of my children. I touched the torn fabric and I cried. I thought, if only I could give them more. If only I could change their fate. At that moment, Leo came into the room. He saw my tears and took my hand. He said, "Mother, don't cry. One day I will give you everything you dreamed of." I looked at him. He was only a boy, but his words were strong. My heart shook with both hope and fear. I smiled weakly and kissed his head. A few minutes later, Peter came in. He saw us together. He placed his hand on Leo's shoulder and said, "Son, life is not easy. But if you stay strong, you can change our story." That night I lay in bed and could not sleep. I thought about Leo's words. I thought about Peter's tired hands. I thought about our daughter's sad eyes. I prayed quietly in the dark. I prayed not for myself, but for my children. I said, I could not give them gold. I could not give them a big house, but maybe they will give me peace before I close my eyes. Days passed and life stayed the same. Peter worked in the fields. I washed clothes and cleaned houses. Neighbors sometimes laughed at us. They said, "Look at that family. They have nothing." Their words were sharp. I tried to ignore them, but my heart trembled. I held my children and told them, "Do not be afraid. One day life will be better." But in my own heart, I felt weak. One afternoon I sat with Peter. My voice was low. I said, "We gave everything, but still people laugh at us. I feel like a failure." Peter held my hand and said, "You are not a failure. You are the strongest woman I know. Without you, this family would not survive." His words gave me comfort, but I still felt broken inside. I asked him, "Will our children ever forgive us for giving them this life?" He had no answer. He only pulled me close and held me in silence. The struggle became worse when money ran short. Some days we had only bread and tea for dinner. I gave my share to the children and told them I already ate, but I had not eaten. Leo looked at me once and asked, "Mother, why don't you eat?" I forced a smile and said, "Do not worry, my son." He said nothing, but I knew he saw the truth. Leo grew more serious with time. He walked quietly through the house. He listened more than he spoke. When neighbors made fun of us, I often came home with tears. Leo always saw my red eyes. One evening he asked me, "Mother, why do you cry?" I shook my head and said, "Nothing, son. I am only tired." But he knew. He clenched his fists and whispered, "I will change this. I swear I will." I wanted to stop him. I wanted to tell him not to carry such heavy thoughts. But I could not. I saw fire in his young eyes. He was no longer just a boy. He was already carrying the weight of our pain. The years did not make things easier. As Peter and I grew older, our strength began to fade. My hands sometimes shook when I carried water. Peter could not stand straight after long work. Still, we kept going. Our love kept us alive, but love did not give us respect. We stayed poor. One evening I sat with Leo. My voice was soft. I said, "Son, you are our only hope now. Your sister needs a good life. You must study. You must make something of yourself." Leo looked at me and said, "Mother, I will not only make something of myself, I will give you the life you deserve." I touched his face and whispered, "Do not promise too much, my son." He looked back at me and said, "Life is cruel." Then I will be stronger than life. That night I felt both afraid and proud. Afraid because I knew the world was heavy. Proud because I saw courage in my son's eyes. I closed my eyes and prayed again. I prayed that his promise would not break him. I prayed that one day my son would stand tall. I prayed that one day I would see him give me peace before I left this world. Leo grew older, but he never forgot his words. He wanted to give me peace. He wanted to give our family respect. From a young age, he started to look for work. He did not care if the job was small. He only wanted to help. At first, he carried water for people. He walked in the hot sun and in the cold wind. People gave him a few coins. He came home tired but smiling. He put the coins in my hand and said, "Mother, this is for you." I cried quietly and told him, "You should not suffer like this." But Leo said, "Your pain is greater than mine. Let me carry it now." Soon he found another job. He cleaned tables in a small cafe. He wiped dishes, washed floors, and worked from morning until night. The owner shouted at him many times, but Leo stayed quiet. His hands were red from soap. I touched them one night and whispered, "My son, you are burning yourself for me." He answered, "For you, I will burn and rise again." Weeks passed. Leo worked wherever he could. He carried heavy bags in the market. He delivered food to houses. He sold newspapers on the street. Many times he came home sick. Many times he wanted to give up. But each time he looked at me, he remembered his promise. He whispered to himself, "Her tears are my fuel. I cannot stop." At night, Leo did not rest. He borrowed old books from a friend. He sat in the corner of our small house and read for hours. The light was dim, but he kept reading. He wanted to learn about money. He wanted to learn about business. He wanted to know how the world worked. I often woke up in the night and saw him sitting there. I asked, "Why don't you sleep, my son?" He smiled at me and said, "Mother, I will sleep after I win." My heart was heavy with both pride and fear. Peter watched him too. One evening, Peter said, "Son, I worked like this all my life, but the world crushed me. Are you sure you can fight it?" Leo looked at his father with strong eyes and said, "Father, you fought alone. I fight with Mother's tears in my heart. That will make me stronger." Peter sighed and said, "Then go, my son. May you succeed where I failed." After some months, Leo saved a little money. He decided to try something new. He bought a few small items and sold them in the street. He stood outside in the cold and called to people. Some ignored him. Some mocked him. Some bought from him. When he came home with a small profit, he placed it in front of me. I looked at the money and whispered, "My son, you are planting seeds of hope." He answered, "Mother, one day these seeds will grow into trees of respect for you." Days turned into months. Leo worked harder and harder. His friends asked him to relax, to spend time with them. But Leo shook his head and said, "My youth belongs to my mother. She gave me life. Now I will give her peace." They laughed at him, but he did not care. Sometimes he failed. Once, some men cheated him in a deal. He came home with empty pockets. His face was full of pain. I asked him, "What happened, my son?" He clenched his fists and said, "They fooled me, Mother. They stole from me. But I will not stop. They can take my money, but they cannot take my fire." I hugged him and said, "Your fire will light the world one day." Leo kept learning. He saved every coin he could. Soon, he had enough to open a very small shop. It was just a corner where he sold small goods. Still, it was his own. He stood there from morning to night. Some days were good. Some days no one came. But Leo never closed early. He told himself, "If I quit, I break my promise. I cannot break it." One evening I visited his shop. I saw my son standing proudly behind the counter. My eyes filled with tears. "My son," I said softly, "you are turning nothing into something. You are building with your own hands." Leo smiled and said, "Mother, one day this shop will become a door to your peace." I touched his face and whispered, "I believe you, Leo." But the road was not easy. Some bigger shopkeepers grew jealous. They spread lies about him. They told people his goods were bad. Some tried to cheat him again. Leo lost money more than once. He came home tired and angry. Still, he whispered, "I will not give up. My mother's tears are my strength." Months passed and his shop began to grow. He learned how to deal with people. He learned to say no when someone tried to cheat him. He learned to save instead of spending. Slowly, he opened another small shop on a different street. Then another. His name began to spread in town. People said, "That young man works hard. He is honest. He will go far." For the first time, I felt a change. Neighbors who once mocked me now greeted me with respect. Some even said, "You raised a fine son." I smiled, but inside I thought, it is not me. It is his own courage. The change also touched our daughter. Proposals that never came before now slowly started to arrive. One evening she whispered to me, "Mother, maybe now someone will want me." I kissed her forehead and said, "Of course, my child. Your worth was always high. People were blind, but now they see." Leo worked harder than ever. He supported his sister's marriage. The wedding was not rich, but it was full of joy. I cried as I placed her hand into her husband's. I whispered, "Go, my child. Live with respect. Your brother gave you this gift." My daughter hugged Leo and said, "Brother, you saved my life." That night I sat with Peter. I said softly, "Do you see, Peter? Our daughter is married. Our son is rising. Maybe our story is changing." Peter smiled and answered, "It is changing because of him." I looked at Leo and thought, his promise is carrying us all. Still, Leo did not rest. He whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning. I will not stop until my mother never cries again." He carried his vow like a flame that refused to die. From dust, my son was rising, not only in money, but also in respect and in honor. Leo's shop grew more with time. People began to trust him. They said, "He is fair. He is strong. He will go far." His name spread not only in our street, but also in the town. I walked outside and people no longer laughed at me. Some of them lowered their eyes. Some even smiled and said, "You are lucky. Your son is a good man." For the first time in many years, I felt light in my heart. Leo did not change. He did not grow proud. He still remembered my tears. Each time he came home, he sat beside me and asked, "Mother, are you happy now?" I always smiled, but I knew he was still not done. He carried a fire inside him. He wanted more for me, for our family. Soon, Leo opened another shop, then another. He worked day and night. He learned how to deal with people. He learned how to save money. He grew stronger with each year. People in the town began to speak his name with respect. They said, "That boy had nothing, but look at him now." He has built everything with his own hands. Our daughter was now married and happy in her new home. She came to visit me often. She held my hand and said, "Mother, you always told me to wait. Now I understand. My brother gave me a good life, and you gave me courage." I kissed her and said, "No, my child. You gave me strength. Without you, I would have fallen." One evening, Leo sat with me. His voice was soft, but strong. He said, "Mother, I promised you peace. I will not stop until you walk with respect. One day the people who laughed at you will bow their heads." His words made me cry. I told him, "My son, you already gave me peace. You gave me more than I asked." But he shook his head. "It is not enough. You will see, Mother. One day you will walk like a queen." Years passed. Leo grew into a man. He was no longer the boy who carried water or sold newspapers. He was a man who owned many shops. He helped others find work. People came to him for advice. Neighbors who once mocked us now came to our door with gifts. They said, "Forgive us. We were wrong. Your son is greater than gold." I smiled softly. I did not answer with anger. I only said, Respect belongs to those who work hard and carry love. Inside, I felt peace. My heart was full. Leo also found love. He met a kind young woman named Emily. She was gentle and brave. She believed in him. She told him, "I do not care about wealth. I care about your heart." He told me about her one night. He lowered his head and said, "Mother, her name is Emily. She gives me peace." I held his hand and whispered, "If she gives you peace, then she is a blessing." Emily came to our home many times. She spoke to me with respect. She cared for me as if I was her own mother. I prayed quietly in my heart. I prayed that she would stay by his side. I prayed that my son would know love not only from me, but also from her. One evening, Leo said to me, "Mother, I want to marry Emily. But I do not want the wedding to be simple. I want it to be the day you walk with pride. I want the world to see that you are my honor." Tears filled my eyes. I whispered, "My son, you already gave me honor. But if this is your dream, I will wait for it." Months later, the wedding day came. The hall was full of people. There were lights, flowers, and music. People came from near and far. Some came with respect, some came with curiosity, and some came because they wanted to see how far we had come. When I entered the hall, I felt the eyes of everyone on me. Some of them were the same neighbors who once mocked me. Now they looked down. They could not meet my eyes. I wore a simple dress, but I walked slowly and with peace in my heart. My husband Peter walked beside me. His back was bent with age, but his eyes were full of pride. Leo came to me in front of everyone. He held my hand and said, "Mother, today is not only my wedding. Today is your victory. You gave me life, and I give you respect. No one can laugh at you again." My tears fell. I hugged him and whispered, "My son, you kept your promise. You gave me peace before my last breath." The wedding was full of joy. Leo and Emily held hands. People cheered. Music filled the air. Some of the guests came to me and said, "Forgive us. We were blind before. You are blessed with a son greater than gold." I only smiled. I did not want revenge. I only wanted peace, and now I had it. After the wedding, life moved forward. Leo's work grew more. His shops turned into a company. People from other towns came to know his name. They said, "He is honest. He is strong. He is different from the rest." But whenever someone praised him, Leo said, "The honor belongs to my mother. She is the reason I stand." Emily also became a blessing. She cared for me every day. She said, "Mother, I cannot take your place, but I will carry your love forward." I hugged her and said, "You already gave me more than I asked. You gave my son peace, and that gave me life." Soon, I held my first grandchild in my arms. The child was small and soft. I cried as I looked at the baby. I whispered, "You come from tears, but you will live in honor. Your father fought for me, and now you will carry his strength." My daughters also came often with their families. They hugged me and said, "Mother, you always told us to wait for our time." You were right. Our brother gave us respect, and you gave us patience. Years passed, and my hair turned white. My hands grew weak, but my heart was full. One night I called Leo to sit beside me. I held his hand and said, "My son, you gave me more than I asked. I prayed only for small peace, but you gave me a river of respect. How did you carry so much weight on your shoulders?" Leo kissed my hand and answered, "Mother, your tears gave me strength. Every insult I heard gave me fire. I could not rest until you were free." I cried softly. I whispered, "Then you are not only my son, you are my victory." Peter sat beside us. His eyes were wet. He said, "I once thought I failed as a man, but you, Leo, proved me wrong. You showed me that love can create greatness even from nothing." Leo hugged his father and said, "You did not fail, Father. You planted the seed. I only watered it. As the years went by, my body grew weaker, but I had no fear. I had lived long enough to see my son keep his promise. I often told Emily, "When I go, do not cry too much. Celebrate instead, for I did not leave this world in shame. I left in peace." On my final birthday, my family gathered around me. Leo stood with Emily and their children. My daughter and her family filled the room with laughter. I looked at them all and said, "This is my treasure. Not gold, not silver, but faces full of love." That night I called Leo once again. My voice was weak, but steady. "My son, do you remember the day you promised me peace?" His eyes filled with tears. He whispered, "Yes, Mother." I remember every word. I smiled faintly. "You kept it. You gave me more than peace. You gave me a life worth remembering." I closed my eyes slowly. I left the world not in sorrow, but in peace. My last whisper was, "Love never fails." My family cried, but their tears were not shame. They were tears of love. They knew our story was not one of poverty. It was the story of a mother's sacrifice and a son's promise.